topic and really among a phenomenal lineup of speakers today. So you may have noticed that I have kind of a different background, and I totally own and recognize that I have an employment history working for institutions and positions that are known to perpetuate colonization and social injustice. What I can offer is that it's through those experiences that I've really come to realize what privilege really is and start to work through some of my own privilege. So I'll just leave it with that, and we'll talk a little bit about what the Forest Service is doing here in the states of Oregon and Washington. So I'm not going to read this verbatim. A couple things I do want to point out is that the Forest Service it's not under Department of Interior, it's under Department of Agriculture. And while we're often confused with National Park Service, we have a different mission, and it's a multiple use mission, which adds a little complexity when we're looking at changing culture, at least in my opinion, because we have a lot of different issues that we're trying to cover, and a lot of management areas that are all siloed. So this is an example of that. I'm not going to read it. I ask that you just kind of read through these points, but this is just a snapshot of some information of Oregon and Washington and how the Forest Service shows up. A couple of things that I think are important to point out is that we're not a small organization. This is just one region of many. We've got over 3,500 full-time permanent employees, 2,000 seasonals, and then each year, through partners such as Northwest Youth Corps and others, we employ over 1,200 youth and young adults, conservation service crews, and internships. So we also interface with the public a lot, and it may be through the over 15 million people that come and recreate on these lands every year. It may be through the over 135,000 conservation education or environmental education contacts that we have through our partners. Or it could be through the thousands of special use permits that are issued for things like outfitters and guides, or special forest products for things such as mushroom foraging. So my main point here is that it's a big system, it's kind of clunky, and I think that if you're going to drive change, it's important to know what you're trying to change and at what levels you need to try to implement that. So before we go any further, I really want to acknowledge the past. As it turns out, we have a really bad history. We have a dark history, and we need to call that out. So, not only does America, North America, specifically the United States of America, have a history of violent appropriation of indigenous lands, it also has a history of, the American conservation movement, that while we do have, or at least those of us who are privileged enough to enjoy these public lands today, have access to millions upon millions of acres across this country. That was done in part by people like Gifford Pinchot and John Muir, who formed these agencies, these lands, these organizations that we're still working with today, but on principles that were outwardly racist and that were proponents of eugenics and other things along those lines. So, you can come angry if you're suburban. Other injustices, we look at even more recent history, looking at the New Deal and how the Civilian Conservation Corps was implemented. And really that was for white folks. We look at the segregation that took there for people of color, especially for African American and Black men of color. And in the instances where they actually were employed, they had the worst working conditions, the worst jobs, the lowest pay. It was not at all equitable. So I'm sure that other folks will be sharing more of our history, but I just wanted to start with that because our history is important, because it takes us to where we are now. It's what established these structures and these processes that we're working with right now. It's also important for recognizing how we've excluded groups historically, how we're still excluding groups today, and how we're continuing to other people. Also, part's not widely known. People in this room likely have an awareness of this. A lot of people outside of this room don't, and that's a problem. There's more to the story. There's a lot more that went on in our past. It's not just a white past. It's not just a white, male, heterosexual, Christian past. There are other people that built these public lands and built the legacies that we're living with today that should be recognized as well. All right, so efforts for a brighter future. We have a lot of work to do, but I want to leave you with a snapshot of hope at least. There's not enough time for me to give the accolades to the different organizations, partner groups, the tribes that we work with throughout the region, or the national forests throughout the region that do great work. So I'm going to focus on some of the higher level efforts that our team is working on in our regional office based in Portland. The part of that's updating our internal processes. So if we're giving out funds to help with youth engagement or environmental education projects, they have to be tied to projects that are directly, deliberately, and genuinely engaging underserved and underrepresented audiences. And we hold forests accountable to that. We're working on content development, not just communication, but our engagement techniques to make sure that they're more culturally relevant and linguistically relevant. So it's not just translating something and hoping that it's correct. We're being explicit that equity, diversity, and inclusion is important in our agreements and our contracts. And we're trying to be creative about how we can bring fresh new perspectives on board, because USA jobs and federal resumes and working on applying to a position with the federal government, pretty challenging. But there are other avenues in working with partners through Public Land Corps and the Resource Assistant Program and other types of internships where we can get these fresh new perspectives and ideas into the agency and start changing those internal perspectives and start interfacing with our communities more effectively. And we have a long way to go on this last point, but I think we're finally getting to a place, or at least a small and mighty bunch of us throughout the agency are starting to get to a place where we recognize that we have to listen instead of prescribing. We need to know what folks want instead of making assumptions. So, I think there are a few more things I want to touch on. I think this slide jumped ahead of me a little bit. But in talking a little bit more about these challenges and barriers, I mentioned USA jobs and federal hiring processes. These are things that need to be addressed, and these are the things that we need help from folks like you to address. Our hiring process is cumbersome. It is something that unless you have a special hiring authority that you have access to, you're probably not going to get in the agency. And how can you change an agency mentality and culture if you don't get fresh perspectives? So along with that, we have inconsistent and unpredictable funding, especially for community engagement work. So we look at scenarios where folks are stretched thin, and this work doesn't necessarily stay at a top priority. And that's a problem, because it's not earmarked by Congress to go towards this type of work. And we also have permits and paperwork that create access barriers to people, whether they want to contract with us, whether they want to do research. So we need to look at changing some of the language and the way that we approach issuing those types of documents. Okay, so back on track now. So our efforts to a brighter future. There is hope out there. One little example that I want to give of that is that in our regional office, these are the main partners that we had. Not that. These are the main partners that we had in 2015. That's Job Corps. Now, today, we've got these partners. So we're finding that non-governmental organizations especially are far more nimble than the federal government, as it turns out. So we work with them. We have so much to gain just the knowledge base, in exposure, in experience, in collective impact. So, you know, some of these are unusual suspects, some of these are usual suspects in terms of the partner groups that we may work with. But through all of these organizations, we're working with them in ways that we can directly engage with underserved communities, or those communities that have historically been underrepresented in the Forest Service or on public lands. All right, so parting words for public land managers. Convince your colleagues that this work is important. It's always worth the extra effort. We have to actively work. So can't be status quo. We have to be pushing outside of our comfort zones, speaking up and taking active steps to change how we're doing things. Because business as usual is not respectful of diversity, it's not equitable, and it's not inclusive. We need to continue to work with partners, contractors, etc., that value equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that are going to help us raise that. We need to vigorously pursue different perspectives different than our own, and learn the experiences of others. We need to hire the right people. For everybody else, please help us. Your help is needed. There are people here that want to work with you. Help us tell the real history. And for folks of color, for people of color, you've been talking to the other side for centuries. For the rest of us, we need to talk to the other side to get them to buy into some of this. I think that we saw that play out at a national level within the last couple of years. So know that it's important that we connect with the right decision makers and the right change agents at all levels. And there are decision makers and change agents in land management agencies at all levels. Also, please know that all things political, we can inform but not advocate. Know about forest collaborative groups, federal advisory committees, and other ways that you can insert yourself and implement change internally. And know that what federal land management agencies can or cannot do is largely defined through legislation or agency policy, but change, again, does happen at all levels. So, I will say, again, please go back to point one, your help is needed, your voice is needed. We need to hear your perspective, and we need you to help drive the change as well. So thank you very much.